What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over some wide receivers that I believe have an extremely high ceiling this season. Just like with the running back video, I'm excluding the top 15 wide receivers in terms of ADP because they obviously all have a ton of upside. So you don't need me telling you that Tyreek Hill could go off. We all know that. So I'll put a graphic on the screen to show you exactly who that excludes, but the top 15 wide receivers being drafted right now in order are Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devonta Adams, and Adams, of course, being 3 right now because of that bit of an ambiguity in terms of the Aaron Rodgers situation, but I would say once that's resolved, if it's resolved, he'll be number 1. 4, A.J. Brown, then DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, maybe we see that rise if Julio gets traded. Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, and then Julio is at 16. I'm just going to include him as well. You guys know Julio has a ton of upside, so we're not going to include him in the video as well. So those are 16 receivers not eligible for this video. So we'll go over my list in a second, but first, have to start things off as usual. The stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was in 2021, 3 wide receivers finished with double-digit receptions inside the 10-yard line. Devonta Adams, Tyreek Hill were 2 of them. We said who was the 3rd. The answer is Adam Thielen. And Jacob Massive was the first to get that on YouTube. And at Kirk Wasabi was the first to get that on Twitter. Today's stat. What team led the league in first quarter points per game last season? All right, let's talk about some wide receivers with upside. First up, we're going to go over Brandon Aiyuk. Now, I went over Aiyuk in our Lamb versus Deontay versus Aiyuk video, and I did mention him again when discussing why I will be avoiding Deebo Samuel. But I've read through the comments, and you guys are not convinced that Aiyuk has any sort of ceiling. So I've given it some more thought because, of course, when you guys make comments, you make points, I think about it, right? I'm willing to completely change my opinion if I'm presented with information that I think is valid. I read something and I'm like, you know what? I believe this. I don't agree with my take anymore. I'll change it for sure. I'll do a complete 180. So I thought about it more. I wanted to see, do I still hold the take? And actually, I would say my take has changed a little bit even leading up to those videos and a little bit after those videos. So to start, I was all in on Aiyuk. Then I did start to think about it more. I got a little bit more concerned with some of the things you guys were saying, and so I had to deep dive into the research a little bit more, and I have come to the conclusion that I will be targeting Aiyuk aggressively this season. Let's make one thing very clear. Brandon Aiyuk is the 49ers ex-receiver, right? He played that role last season. He absolutely dominated. 88th percentile success rate versus man, 86th percentile success rate versus the press, with an above average success rate on any route he ran more than 5% of the time. He has already proven to be one of the league's best route runners, and that is extremely important to understand. I think most people assume that he was only good because everyone was out and Shanahan just schemed him a ton of looks and he did a lot after the catch. That's kind of how this offense operates with Kittle and Deebo Samuel. But that was not true. Aiyuk got open on his own and he proved that he can win on the outside. So why is that important? Well, if he was only winning after the catch on these schemed looks, then his value could take a big hit if we return George Kittle, we return Deebo Samuel, because they could easily just swap in Deebo Samuel for these routes, and then Aiyuk sees a lot fewer targets and a lot less upside because if he's not getting the looks on these schemed looks, not getting this run after the catch, well, then he's useless. And that was part of my hesitancy in ranking him really high, in these past few weeks, because I wasn't 100% sure that he was going to get these looks. But I'm not concerned with that anymore. It is clear that Aiyuk is going to be their ex receiver, and his dominance in that role as a rookie gives me plenty of confidence that he'll parlay that into a great 2021. And if you think he doesn't have any upside in that role, like, I feel like people are forgetting that he was the wide receiver 6 from week 7 on last season as a rookie, with mostly Nick Mullins and then a splash of CJ Beathard as his quarterbacks. So regardless of what direction they go, Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, he did not have Jimmy G when he was dominating last season. He had Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. So at a bare minimum, he's getting an upgrade there. And I'm just not concerned that a fully healthy Deebo Samuel has a major impact to Brandon Aiyuk, because he is just so incredibly good that he's going to make up for it. He's going to command those targets, and they weren't scheming him the ball on run after the catch plays. He was just getting open because he's a dominant number 1 wide receiver, and I don't think people fully understand that. I think they think that he's basically interchangeable with Deebo Samuel, and that's just simply not the case. So I'm absolutely targeting Brandon Aiyuk for a ton of upside this season. The next wide receiver that has a lot of upside is Chase Claypool. Now, I know that I've been critical of the Steelers' passing attack this offseason. I've thrown a lot of shade at them, just saying they were pretty overrated last season, that it was pretty much just volume getting them there most of the time. But that doesn't mean that there's just no potential here. I mean, Claypool became just the 13th wide receiver ever to score 11 or more touchdowns as a rookie. And he did it as a part-time player, typically playing between like 65% and 75% of the snaps any given week. And then what did he do in their playoff game? He scores another 2 touchdowns. This kid's just like a touchdown machine. And here's the best part. Claypool was like kind of unlucky. I'll kind of go over why it wasn't really luck involved in a second, but you could kind of look at it and say he was unlucky in the touchdown department because he led the team with 9 targets inside the 10-yard line, but he only caught 3 of them. You know, Juju and Ebron caught 7 and 5 of their targets inside the 10-yard line, having fewer than his 9, and Deontay caught 3 of his 5 targets. So these guys were getting as much, if not more, of the receptions on fewer targets. I mean, just imagine if Claypool was as efficient in the red zone as they were. His issue was that it was his fault. You know, it wasn't just like Big Ben was trash. I mean, you have to realize that if everyone else is catching their targets, that maybe it's something to do with Claypool. And you see he did have an extremely low 46.7% contested catch rate. So it was Claypool's fault that he wasn't converting these into touchdowns. So I'm saying the unlucky part is just saying he scored 13 touchdowns across his first 17 weeks. And it could have been more if he was efficient and he was doing well, or even just being league average in contested catch rate. So it wasn't luck as much as an opportunity to expand. And I think that's why he makes the video, because he is just easily the clear alpha wide receiver in this offense when you're talking about a prototypical outside wide receiver that can just dominate, right? Like Deontay Johnson is probably their number 1 because he's so exceptional at route running. But if we're talking about who can just be the guy in the offense that's going deep downfield, converting in the red zone, it has the potential to be Claypool. And when we're trying to find receivers that are posting just dominant stat lines in fantasy, it's the type of receiver that Claypool is. Guys who can score 12, 13, 14 touchdowns in a season to go along with 1,100, 1,200 receiving yards, because they can also get loose deep. So he'll absolutely need to be better at winning contested catches, because that's where the upside comes, is in the red zone. He's got to be good in that area. But once he does, there are very few corners that are going to be able to contain him. Matt Harmon compared his rookie season to that of DK Metcalf, and I think that's a fantastic comparison. Both of them were second-round draft picks that people did question their ability to produce high numbers in the NFL. Both have just dominant athletic profiles, and both showed incredible success rates as a rookie, dominating deep downfield and on slants. Claypool's number 1 and number 2 routes were the 9 or the go route, and then the slant, both around 26% of the time. As a rookie, Metcalf also ran both those routes at the first and second most percentages, and he did post above average success rates on both. And if we compare their success rates against man and the press, they're virtually identical in their rookie season. So I am all over Claypool this season, even if they change their offense to be more run heavy. Well, that hurts Juju, that hurts Deontay. It doesn't impact Claypool as much as it impacts those two, because those guys are getting there on just force-fed volume like 5 yards downfield. Well, that's not where Claypool dominates. Again, like I said, he's exceptional at winning on slants, but he's going to get his fantasy value deep downfield and in the red zone. And those things aren't impacted by shifting slightly more towards the ground game. And I think just like the larger point here, even if you want to just simplify everything, if we're talking about like mid and late round wide receivers that have the most upside, I feel like we need to mention the 6'4", 240-pound wide receiver who has a 99th percentile speed score and has scored 13 touchdowns across his first 17 games. Like, you just throw everything else out. He is a physical freak, touchdown monster. How do we not talk about him as a player with upside? Sure, he could bust. Sure, maybe he just got super lucky last season scoring deep touchdowns. But the upside is just very clearly there with Claypool. The next wide receiver we'll go over today is Courtland Sutton. Now, Sutton had a solid rookie season before breaking out in year two, posting a stat line of 72 for 1,112 yards and 6 touchdowns, proving that he can win as well as a true number one wide receiver, even with a combination of Jeff Driscoll, Brett Ripien, and Drew Lock as a rookie. And Lock was not good as a rookie. But then, unfortunately, he tears his ACL in week 2 and, of course, misses the rest of the season because he can't return from a torn ACL. Now, a lot of people are going to get scared off by the ACL tear, but there's a pretty decent track record of young players recovering from a torn ACL. You know, if you're 28, 29, 30, maybe not. But players that are under like 25, 26 years old, they recover pretty well from torn ACL, so we shouldn't just be completely scared off by that. Sutton is still just 25, and I expect him to be a full go in week 1. That's what the reports are now. So until we see some sort of setback, be under the assumption that he's going to be good to go in week 1. So assuming that he is healthy, I expect him to be there 1, with Judy operating more as the 2. You know, Sutton, just like with Claypool, should see more looks downfield, should see more looks in the red zone, with Judy operating more targets closer to the line of scrimmage. And that's not to say that Judy is only running like screens and slants and outs, but in general, Sutton is working deeper downfield than Judy. And you just heard me go over this with Claypool. When we're looking for breakout performances in fantasy, for players to post dominant seasons, I want their targets to be deep. I want them to be used in the red zone. And that just perfectly fits Courtland Sutton, not to mention he has the athletic profile to go along with a monster season. So I do think that Sutton is just a great mid-round wide receiver to target because he fits the build that we're really, really looking for these dominant seasons. And this is assuming that Drew Lock is a quarterback. But as of recording this, there's still that small chance that Aaron Rodgers gets traded to the Broncos. And if that happens, Sutton's ADP is going to skyrocket. And that possibility is not being priced in right now on Underdog. So if you want to gain that edge right now, Sutton is definitely going too late as a wide receiver 28 off the board. And so if you want to see like exactly which wide receivers have this difference, are higher in our rankings than on Underdog, you can easily see that on our rankings. Underdog ADPs are right next to our positional rankings, so you can see exactly who's undervalued, who's overvalued right now. And if you want to take advantage of that right now, then sign up for an Underdog account, use promo code FFA. You're going to get a $25 deposit bonus, so you can do a bunch of drafts for free. So go to underdogfantasy.com or just use the link tree in the description if you want to find it that way as well. But I really think that just on basically every format, that possibility isn't being factored in. And it's not like there's a 0% chance. It's a small chance, but there's a chance that Sutton has Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback And what is he, a top 12 wide receiver at that point, going as a wide receiver 28. So if you want to gain these edges, you have to figure out who's a chance. If everything breaks their way, who could be, a top 7 wide receiver that's going outside the top 25? Sutton absolutely fits the bill for that. The final wide receiver we'll go over today is DJ Moore. Now, Moore will be entering his 4th season at age 24, and he's coming off his best season as a pro, getting 79.5 yards per game, 10.1 yards per target, over 18 yards per reception. But his season was even more impressive than that. Moore finished with the 2nd highest share of their team air yards, behind only Michael Thomas, just ahead of Calvin Ridley, ahead of DK Metcalf, and he also finished 6th in weighted opportunity rating, right behind Diggs and Calvin Ridley, right ahead of Metcalf and Justin Jefferson. This year, Curtis Samuel is gone to join the football team, and while he was replaced, it was only by rookie Terrence Marshall, and I don't expect Marshall to command the same target share as Curtis Samuel. Now, some people are going to argue that, McCaffrey is back, and so his targets will actually go down. But Mike Davis still had 59 receptions through effectively 14 weeks, and so that's not like Christian McCaffrey levels, but it's not like they completely went away from the running backs, giving them 0 targets. He was still one of the most targeted running backs in the entire NFL, and like I said when breaking him down about a week ago, he had 5 or more receptions in 7 separate weeks. So that is significantly more than basically every single high-end running back. I think it was only J.D. McKissick that had more than that. So they were still absolutely targeting the running backs. McCaffrey coming back doesn't just tank the value of DJ Moore. So why am I excited about him this season? Well, in his career, he's caught passes from Cam Newton, Teddy Bridgewater, Tyler Heineke, Phillip Walker, Kyle Allen, Will Greer. None of those are high-end talents or even league average in terms of passing ability. Now, I don't want to be one of those people who just assumes that Sam Darnold is good and that he was only bad because he was on the Jets, because he could certainly just be bad, right? But this video, again, is about upside hunting. And it is absolutely possible that a 21 to 23-year-old Sam Darnold wasn't put in the best position to succeed by the joke that is the New York Jets football club, right? That does remain a possibility. And if that's the case, and Sam Darnold is even close to what people thought he could be when he was drafted, then this passing attack could see a big upgrade. And since Moore has proven to be an elite talent, and just had a season with an insane opportunity share, he would stand to benefit massively if Sam Darnold ended up being an upgrade. And some people like to argue that Moore isn't actually good, he hasn't proven to be a great wide receiver, but I don't really understand where that narrative comes from. Only 5 wide receivers have ever gained over 3,150 yards before turning 24. Randy Moss, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, David Boston, and DJ Moore. And among those receivers, Moore trails only Randy Moss in yards per target. Moore is really good, okay? And this could be, and probably will be, the best offense he's been on so far, and he could have the most opportunity so far. Obviously, last season was just incredible in terms of weighted opportunity, but he could match that again this season. And if the offense is an upgrade, that's going to be fantastic for him in fantasy. Now, if we're talking about this in terms of odds, this is kind of how I want to close it. I talk about all of these players, they have a ton of upside, right? This isn't me saying DJ Moore is going to be a top 5 wide receiver. I still think there's maybe a 10 to 15% chance that he busts. The offense is just trash, Sam Darnold is awful, and DJ Moore does absolutely nothing. I put it only 10 to 15% because, Sam Darnold could still be bad, but, Moore's quarterbacks were already bad, so it doesn't mean that, Darnold being bad doesn't mean that Moore is going to have a terrible season in fantasy. So I think 10 to 15% covers the odds that it's Sam Darnold is really bad, and Moore just can't do anything with him at quarterback. Feels pretty unlikely, that's why I'm putting it so low. But then I'd still put it at probably a 60% chance that he basically just returns value at his ADP, ending up in that mid wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 3 range, that kind of grouping. But that still leaves a 25 to 30% chance that this offense ends up being pretty solid and Moore has an opportunity to hit his ceiling. I just want to point that out because of all the wide receivers on this list, none of them are just locks to dominate. No one's a lock to dominate because things happen, right? It's football. But all of them absolutely have a path. There are absolutely clear opportunities for them to be wide receiver ones. And none of them are being drafted even close to that range. And I think all of them are being undervalued right now because of that. So those are some wide receivers that I would be targeting in drafts. I know a lot of you don't draft until August, but like I've said, you can always join a best ball draft before then. They're a great way to see where people are going right now, how ADPs are shifting, and to just get better at drafting by drafting against people who are actually trying and actually know what they're doing, because that's not always the case in mock drafts. So if you want to try out Underdog, sign up using promo code FFA. You're going to get a $25 deposit bonus, which is actually a ton of free drafts. You can do a draft for $3. That's a lot of drafts you're getting for free. So check that out, underdogfantasy.com, or clicking the link tree in the description box down below and finding it there. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.